Hey there, welcome to Blockhead, the podcast where cartoonists talk comics and just about everything else. My name is Geoff Grogan. I'm a cartoonist, animator, and illustrator, and for the next hour or so, I'll be your host in a series of conversations with comics creators about their lives, their work, and comics. So sit back and enjoy. Hey gang, welcome to a brand new episode of Blockhead, and a special episode it is. We are talking to the curator and gallery director of a brand new show celebrating comics at William Paterson University Gallery called Sunday Comics, the Creative Page, which takes place in the Shawn Center for the Visual Arts. This is a wonderful show featuring an array of cartoonists, both historical and contemporary, of which I am one and proud to be so. It's a wonderful, really, exploration of that great canvas we call the Sunday Comics page. And it opens this week, actually, February 10th, and is open to the public until March 20th of this year. So those of you in Wayne, New Jersey, or thereabouts, in the city or in New York or elsewhere, if you have the opportunity, if you're driving by William Paterson or you live in the area, head on over to the Shawn Center for the Visual Arts and check it out, because it's sure to be, I can't wait to see it myself. You'll find out today in our discussion today, it's sure to be a really interesting exhibition, and features an array of work derived from the papers of Jerry Robinson, the great Jerry Robinson, you know, the cartoonist, one of the cartoonists behind the success of Batman back in the golden age of comics, co-creator of the Joker and Robin the Boy Wonder. Also a great comics historian in his own right. His papers there are at Columbia University, and I guess Karen Green, the director or the archivist of the comics collection at Columbia University, opened their doors to Claudia Goldstein, art historian and curator of this exhibition, and Casey Mathern, the gallery director at William Paterson University, opened their doors and introduced them to the wonders really that are there, and specifically those that are part of the collection of Jerry Robinson's. Again, as I said, great comics artist, great cartoonist, but also a great comics historian. And there's a great collection of work there from Jerry Robinson's archives, much of which is tear sheets from newspapers of the past, and that's where a lot of this historical work is coming from. So it includes cartoonists like Winsor McCay, George Harriman, and others, and some surprises like cartoonist Rosie O'Neill of the Cupid Dolls, and contemporary artists such as Robert Sikoryak, Charles Featherall, Maël Dolevue, and Gideon Kendall, Benjamin Morse, Bodie Tuning, and myself, actually, and I'm proud to be included in this show. So it's an exciting show, I think, a unique experience, and I encourage you all, if you're around, to get over there to see it, because I think it'll be an eye-opener. I've seen some of the work, and I have to say it's really beautiful, and exciting and different and challenging, and it takes the Sunday comics someplace else. So you should definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. So why don't we get right to it, okay? From William Paterson University, Casey Mathern, the gallery director of the University Gallery there, and Claudia Goldstein, Professor Claudia Goldstein, art historian and curator with Casey of this terrific show, Sunday Comics, the Creative Page. Okay, so without further ado, let's get to it. I will check in with you again, as usual, at the other side. And until then, enjoy. Welcome to Blockhead, Claudia Goldstein and Casey Mathern. I hope I pronounced your name right, Casey. Was that correct? Yeah.
You did, yes.
Yeah. Welcome. It's so great to have you here on Blockhead. Usually we talk to cartoonists, but I think it's fitting that we talk to two curators exhibition director Casey, right? And
Gallery director, yes.
gallery director and art historian Professor Claudia Goldstein. Casey, do you also teach at the university? Do you also have that title, professor?
I do not teach in my current role, no.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good.
But
Uh,
she could.
certainly, I'm sure. Yeah. So, well, yeah, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll get into talking about the exhibition, which is called Sunday Comics: The Creative Page, and which I think is ex a really exciting subject for an exhibition. But Claudia, why don't you let us know what your background is and what brings you to comics?
Okay, hello everybody. So I am an art historian and I'm a professor of art history at William Paterson. Oddly, maybe my main area of interest and research is the Renaissance. It is not comics. Um, but and I teach Renaissance courses. I teach Baroque. I teach all kinds of other things. But since I came to William Paterson in 2002, I started about 2 years later teaching a course on the art of comics. And that was just honestly mostly out of personal interest. And I really didn't know what I was doing at the beginning. So I don't know how much we want to talk about that. Um, but I'm just so my interest in comics really just comes from an interest in visual narrative. And I got really interested in Crumb because he's often been compared to Peter Bruegel, and Bruegel is my main area of
Oh, okay.
focus.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe that's enough for now, but that's where I come, that's how I come into the scene.
That's interesting to think about Bruegel as a touchstone and a connection to Crumb. I think it's not at all out of the realm of, credulity. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Bruegel's work as a
Yeah,
as a documenter of uh life in the what 17th century? Is it
16th,
16th
yeah.
century? I always get the two mixed up.
Yeah, the me too. Um, and one other thing I'll say about that is just that the it all really started with a quote in the New Yorker that was in like an ad that said it was Robert Hughes, uh,
Hmm.
the writer Robert Hughes
Yeah.
saying From is the Bruegel of the 20th century.
Okay.
It was like, what does that even mean? And so then, and I didn't really know very much about Crumb, so that's where I started doing some
That set
investigating.
you on a whole journey.
Set me on a whole journey.
That Robert Hughes, boy.
I'm telling you.
Casey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this exhibition?
For sure. I'm Casey Mather, and I'm director of the University Galleries at William Paterson. And I have a background in exhibitions and collections management. In my current role, I work with a lot of contemporary art and artists. I am an art historian at heart.
Hmm.
I studied art history, 19th and 20th century as an undergrad.
Hmm.
I studied decorative arts, design history, and material culture at the Bard Graduate Center, which is where my graduate degree is from. Also studying 19th and 20th century material culture. So I am always excited to bring a historical angle to shows, and I don't think it's so exotic to put contemporary artists in the same room with historical works.
Hmm.
Um, and so I, ever since I met Claudia about almost 7 years ago, when I came to William Paterson, I knew I wanted to work with her. And so we've been talking about doing a show for several years, and it materialized with this idea she had to show, historical and contemporary comics side by side.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I love the idea, of bringing contemporary artists together with historical works, works from the past, both distant and not so distant. Because, in the studio, artists don't think like that. They don't think, oh, Bruegel is a 16th century, artist whose work, did I get it right that time, Claudia, 16th, or was it 15th?
Yes, that's
16th,
exactly
yeah.
right. Yep.
Right. So, we don't think in those terms, right? We think in terms of what's intriguing and engaging and what's inspiring. And so you start, you stick stuff up in the studio, postcards and and pinups of different artists' work as inspiration, and you draw from that all the time. So you're always in dialogue, with artists from the past. I mean, that's the experience I've always had, is that their work their work is there to steal as much as I as I want to. Indeed. No, but their work is there, and I mean, that's the whole business of what we do is really about dialogue for ourselves and for younger artists and for whomever finds our work and stumbles across it and whatnot.
Yeah.
So the idea of engaging with that seems to me to make perfect sense, a show like that. And it's funny, you don't see a lot of that, it's the rarer occasion that you see contemporary artists exhibiting alongside artists from the past.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's funny because that's really my approach to teaching, because the vast majority of my students are studio art majors and not art history majors. Um, and so for them, what I'm constantly saying is that what we're doing is building a visual memory bank, right? Like and so whatever we're talking about, and it could be literally something as old as cave painting. Um,
Sure.
it's all part of what gets sort of built up in your memory bank.
Hmm.
And it all becomes, and so in a way, like time kind of collapses, and I'm guessing that's kind of what you mean too, that artists are not thinking about how old things are when they're interested in what they look like, right?
Right. Not at all. I mean, you're not worried about what was happening in, the Baroque era. If you're looking at Rembrandt, you're not worried about that. You're
Yeah.
looking at Rembrandt for other reasons, not just for the history of it. And the history is fascinating, and the biographies are fascinating, and that's part of it. That's part of it's always been part of the engagement for me. I've always been fascinated with history, but the bigger part of it in the studio is a whole different experience,
Mhm.
and in the studio, it's about dialogue, and it's about inspiration and imagination, where all those things come together. And,
Yeah.
so we provide, artists provide a kind of synthesis of past and present in a way. It is like a time machine, you know?
It is.
It really is. So, this exhibition then brings together both contemporary comics artists and historical comics artists all around this idea of the Sunday page. So, where did that idea come from? What was the inspiration for it, and how'd you get started with putting it all together?
Do you want me to start, or Casey, or do you want to?
Sure.
Okay, so for me, it was partly that Casey approached me and was interested in in working together on some kind of show, and I knew immediately that I wanted it to be something comics based, for a couple of reasons. One, the practical one of, you can't really do, at a state school in New Jersey, you kind of can't bring in Renaissance work. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's just sort of, but it wasn't even really entirely that. It was that I wanted something that was really going to engage our students. And we have a large number of illustration and animation majors and in fact, I'm teaching the comics course this semester, so we're involving the students in the show as well. But then it was just a question of thinking about things that interest me in the world of comics. And one of the things I've always been interested in is kind of early 20th century um, strips that were just sort of in newspapers, where artists like George Harriman, like, they played with the page in a way that I think eventually got kind of codified into more of a grid. And I mean, it isn't always, but I like pages where there's playfulness and thinking
Mm-hmm.
about maybe the entire rectangle of the page rather and approaching it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it just started out with that, and we reached out to Karen Green at Columbia, and she very graciously opened their collection to us, and we were able to really go through and pick a bunch of interesting things. But then it was, and Casey, I feel like it was also your idea to have that kind of combination, right? Or we discussed it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you have a connection like that, because you went to Columbia, and so you have that sort of entree, it just felt like the right opportunity to seize upon. I think meeting Karen Green at Columbia University Libraries, who's their curator of comics,
Hmm.
meeting her and learning that there was a curator of comics,
Hmm.
and just the incredible resources that are there. I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to showcase the fact that these collections exist.
Hmm.
Um,
Can you tell us a little bit about what you found at Columbia, what kinds of resources are there, and what you're bringing over from Columbia?
Uh, yeah, so Karen, and interestingly, Karen is a medievalist also. And she and I went to grad school at the same, more or less the same time. So it's a kind of interesting. I feel like there are so many parallels between early modern imagery and comics.
Uh-huh. Oh
So
yeah,
that's a
totally. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's that idea of visual narrative and storytelling, and there's so many aspects to it. But honestly, I was a little overwhelmed by the collection that they have. It's so, and it's really so much of it, or maybe I don't know, most of it comes from Karen's particular interests, and also just her ability to curate this really impressive collection that is mostly um, I mean, it's some of it is artists donating their entire archive to the collection. Um, I mean, she could speak to this more directly, but what she also has are things like all of Jerry Robinson's papers,
Oh wow.
um, which
Oh my gosh.
include, yeah, I think she has them all, but it includes a huge number of tear sheets from early 20th century newspapers.
He was a
So
historian himself.
he was, right.
Yeah, not only a great cartoonist and a creator, co-creator of, the Joker and others,
Yeah.
Joe Robinson was also a historian.
Yeah. And really just some amazing material. And so that was really where we ended up drawing. I think everything that we borrowed, right, came
yes.
out of Jerry Robinson's.
Really? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So we're talking tear sheets from the newspapers, from early 20th century newspapers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Although what we borrowed in the end were digital prints, or we had digital prints made
Oh, I see. Yeah, because the
of the
others are
pages.
too fragile, I guess.
They're too fragile. They all needed restoration, and a lot of that material has been amassed, but not necessarily restored yet.
Hmm.
Um, and also, the gallery space that we have has doesn't have. I don't know. How would you describe the climate in there?
It fluctuates.
Fluctuates. It's not good for sensitive materials.
Oh, I see. I was imagining it was in a, environmentally controlled tomb of, all these things. There's somebody
It's very
there.
pretty.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it used to be an open courtyard that
Oh,
they just enclosed without doing anything else, right? I mean, there's no, so in the summer it's hot, in the winter
oh
can be,
yeah, that can wreak havoc on older, particularly old newsprint, which is not
yeah.
known for its stability.
Right.
Indeed.
Yeah.
No.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's interesting. So what are some of the okay, so I'm wondering, like, when you were looking through the collection, what I'm sure you were surprised by many things, but what was like the biggest surprise, or maybe the biggest moment where you just went, wow, this is incredible. I can't believe we're going to do this.
Um, I mean, for me, honestly, it was this page that ended up in the show, which is Rosie O'Neill, who did the Cupid doll. I don't know if
I
you
know the
are.
Cupid dolls, but I didn't know Rosie O'Neill's name.
So I also know the Kewpie dolls because my mother had a Kewpie doll as a kid
Yeah.
that stuck around somehow, and I always found it vaguely creepy, honestly. Um, but I was just I didn't really know anything about its creator, Rosie O'Neill, and so the first tear sheet that I saw of that strip was uh this really interesting, and you'll see it in the show, this really interesting page where it's the page is one big image that has a lot of different parts, but it doesn't necessarily move left to right, top to bottom.
Hmm.
So that was really exciting to see. And then it's always exciting to see, and this is also in the show, like a little Nemo
Oh yeah.
page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where
I
to
mean,
just, I mean, he's like
there's no getting away from the genius of that. That's
There
yeah.
really
There's
isn't.
there really isn't. I mean, I think it doesn't matter what age you're talking about. Winsor McCay is just stunning.
It's just stunning. Yeah, it's really just gorgeous. And so, and also in the show, we have several works that came from that Big Little Nemo book that was published in 2012, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah,
Um,
beautiful books. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We do have those books at the Adelphi Library, both of them, both volumes.
Do you?
Yeah,
Oh,
we do. They're
that's
really,
great.
yeah. That was one of the things when I was still talking to the library.
Oh,
I
do you not speak to them anymore?
No, no, I just don't. I haven't been involved with them since they changed directors and all. It's been a while, and I'm kind of isolated over in my little corner of Adelphi. But anyway, um, yeah, it was one of the things when we were talking about book acquisitions and comic acquisitions. We got both those volumes, which is great,
So, is there a little bit of a comics collection at the Delphi?
Yeah, there is actually, and it was actually the previous director over there. I think the person in charge of that particular area of collections has retired, so I think it's not been kept up. They're also, this is a whole nother topic, but they're also moving away from, traditional analog towards digital, and
Yeah,
and there's fewer and fewer books on view. There, more and more
yeah.
computer stations, which
Right. And like maker spaces and
Yep, yep, which is a sign of the times, which bums me
yeah,
out no end,
it
because
bums me out too.
yeah, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
one of
There's
those people who used to wander into a library and just, wander around and stumble off stuff, across stuff, and
Yeah, and I always say that to my students that there you can do all the online research that you want, but there's nothing that replaces just wandering through the stacks and pulling books off the shelf and just looking
Mhm.
through them,
Yep,
right?
absolutely,
But we're
absolutely.
losing that. It's really it's a tragedy to
It
me.
really is because surfing, surfing, does anybody say that anymore? The web, it sounds so archaic.
It
Um,
does.
but nevertheless, it's just not the same experience. It just isn't, and it's easily to dismiss a lot of things that you come across. You come across these things and scroll on to the next thing. And so you
Yeah.
don't have that experience, that sort of eye-opening experience, or maybe you do, but it's a millisecond. And in a library, if you stumble across a great book, you might be there for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour or so,
Yeah.
and the time goes by, you don't even know, because it's so intriguing.
And I think there's a kind of sameness to doing a digital search. Like every listing, every
Hmm.
library listing even looks the same, but every book looks different. So
Hmm. Hmm.
you're right. Like it allows you to just sort of
Yeah,
or
yeah, your
yeah,
mind can meander.
yeah.
Um, Casey, so your background in art history is in the design area, more or less, in contemporary design. Is that what it sounds like? Is the both fabric and fashion and other areas of design? Is that the case?
Not so much.
Not so much.
It
Okay.
was undergrad, it was formal art history, 19th
Hmm.
and 20th century American and European. And then I wanted to expand the boundaries of that a little bit.
Hmm.
And so when I was looking at graduate programs, I was not only looking at straight up art history programs, but also material culture studies.
Okay. Oh, no,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Did did you find that you were interested when you were in the collections at Columbia, that your interests diverged somewhat from Claudia's, or were you guys simpatico, or did you come across some things that spoke to your sensibility and your interests?
Think we had sort of like wow moments at the same thing. Some of the same things. I think I remember a couple of some of the biggest surprises for me were seeing the process of the artists in
Hmm.
the work because there's so much original work. I think in a medium like comics, which just the nature of being printed in in newsprint. Um, the quality of the printing is kind of it's the same for everyone. It's an equalizer.
Hmm. Certainly.
So to see the originals and to see the process of the drawings and um, watercolors that the artist did, and not straight up comics either. I mean, the artist did other things.
Right, right.
So
Um,
seeing the diversity and seeing the range of media that they employed,
Yeah.
and seeing the original drawings and how they evolved into the printed final format
mhm.
for the mass audiences, was really the delight for me.
It's interesting. I just had Glenn Fleischman on the show, who just published a book called How Comics Were Made, which
Mhm.
walks, you might be familiar with it, walks us through, the reader through a history of how comics throughout the last 100 years or so traveled from the drawing board to the printed page and every step in between, so that we see in that book, it's really a great service that he's done in that book. So we see, how they started with the original on the drawing board, and then you walk through the process of how they actually ended up in print, which was an immensely complicated journey, in the 20th century, at different stages of the 20th century. I mean, it's pretty seamless now in some sense in the digital age, but we're talking about, really intricate steps along the way,
Yeah.
before, and a number of craftspeople in between the cartoonist and the printed work, which is really interesting. But anyway, yeah, it is interesting. I didn't know Columbia had a lot of original artwork as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Did you at any time think about reaching out to Billy Ireland out in Ohio, or was that just too far to go?
Uh, I did not. And it wasn't necessarily that it was so far to go. To be honest, the process of figuring out, or, of who we would ask to be in the show was a little bit organic and came somewhat also from my husband Charlie
Hmm.
Featheroff, who's in the show also. Um, and we had a sort of limited number of people that we could,
Hmm.
just in terms of space, the limited number of people that we could ask. So no, I didn't. But not for any particular, not for a reason that had
But you
anything to
found
do with
enough at Columbia,
distance.
just to be, there's so much at Columbia that you had plenty to draw from.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So who
Yeah.
are some of the, when we talk, you talked about Rosie O'Neill and Harriman and Winsor McKay. Are there other, I mean, how many pieces from Columbia did you end up with? And um, who are some of the other artists whose work or cartoonists' work you're showing?
How many pieces did we end up with? 10?
Yeah. So we ended up with 10. We, we had to narrow it down quite a bit,
I would
as you
see
can
that's
Yes.
imagine.
that's got to be
I
a
actually have to
difficult
open my list.
process.
Um, but yeah, once we had Claudia's direction of going after the Sunday page and using that as, that concept really as an archetype that all of these artists have riffed on over the decades. We narrowed it down to about 10
Hmm.
productions.
And okay, and who are some of those others than, other than the ones we've mentioned? Who are some of the other names that come?
I'm looking at up the list, but Hal Foster.
Of course, yeah, yeah. How could
Yeah,
you
we have.
not have Hal Foster?
How could you not? And that's probably the latest of all of the
Really?
comics.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so everything is pretty much from, I think the earliest page is 1907 or it's between like 1907 and sometime in the 19 teens, and then he is the latest other than the contemporary artists.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think of other the name. His name is escaping me. The guy who
Uh,
created Skippy.
Created what? Skippy?
Skippy. Do you know
Oh,
Skippy?
yeah, I know
Steve
Skippy.
Crosby.
Percy Crosby. Yeah, yeah.
Percy Crosby, right? Which I also, that was another one that was kind of an aha moment for me because I didn't know about him. And when I first laid my eyes on the page that we borrowed, I thought it was Charles Schultz, uh,
He was a
because
big.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. There's just such a strong visual parallel
Mhm.
between that it immediately struck me that this was the inspiration for Peanuts. Uh,
Yes. Percy
but
Crosby was a big influence on Charles Schultz.
yeah, which I did not know. So there he's in there. Do you have the list in front of you, Casey? I'm
It's
just
also Harold Nair,
Harold Nair. Oh, yeah, okay. Harold Nair did what now? I'm.
the Cats and Jammer Kids.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're
right,
right.
Cats and
Okay.
Jammer.
Yeah. How could I forget that? Okay. Yes, that's a Jammer Kids. Wonderful stuff.
I forget that this is the thing with me, and this is where I feel a little bit inadequate as a and just because this is not my main field, is that there are so many names
Yes.
and so many makers. Uh, it's hard to know them all. You can't know them all.
No, of course not. I mean, there are so many. Um, okay, so and so you ended up with about 10. It's interesting. Was there a particular reason that you stuck to like, the early portion of the 20th century? Or was it, I'm hypothesizing, but tell me what, I have an idea what might be the case, but what was it that inspired you to stick to that?
Uh, yeah, what inspired me was initially this idea that in the earliest days of Sunday comics, there were fewer rules. And I don't know if that's actually accurate, but
Mhm.
that was my sense. Like if you think of the way that like Crazy Cat uses the page, or like, and I don't mean to keep coming back to George Harriman, although I feel like he's a
Oh yeah.
wonderful, yeah, example. Um, but that was my hunch. And then I wanted to stick to things that were earlier, but then I also once I started looking through the Columbia collection,
Hmm.
I was also really interested uh, in things that were later, including Prince Valiant,
Hmm.
just in terms of treatment of the page and using the like one of the works we have at the show. It's a storyline about the upside down world, and all of the entire page is flipped upside down.
Is that a
Um,
McKay or is it somebody else?
no, this is Prince Valiant.
Oh,
So
it's a
this,
Prince Valiant.
yeah, it's really cool. So the text is right side up, but the images he clearly drew the other way, and then they flipped it.
Wow, I'm not familiar with that page. I can't wait to see that. That's
Yeah,
really
it's really
interesting.
cool.
Yeah. Wow, Hal Foster is usually so I guess very traditional in his approach to the page.
Yes,
More often than not, he usually works in that grid format, so that's interesting.
he
And then
does. And this is still a grid. It's just an
it's still a
upside
grid,
down
it's just
grid.
upside down. Everything's upside down.
Yeah,
Fascinating. I'll have to go
yeah.
back and look. I have a collection of the Fantagraphics books from
Oh yeah.
Prince
Hmm.
Valley. I'll have to go look for that when I see it. Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely true, right? That early portion of the 20th century, because things weren't codified. There was
Right.
still an approach that there was a great deal of freedom, and also artists had this bigger canvas to work on.
Yeah,
Um, so not only
exactly.
were they working on a printed page that was bigger, but they're also working on originals that are much bigger. I mean, Hal Foster's originals are huge. I mean, for illustrations,
Are
they're
they? I mean, I
yeah,
don't
they're
know
very,
that I've
very
ever
big.
seen any originals.
Yeah, they're very big, and there are photographs of Foster at his drawing table, and you can see that he's working on a piece of illustration board that is 30 by 40 or something like that. It's huge.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I mean, the unfortunate thing is that as you pointed out, as the Sunday comics and comics in the newspaper generally evolved, particularly post World War II,
Yeah,
right? They become comics shrink on the Sunday page,
yeah,
and thus the artists are more constrained,
yeah,
cartoonists are more constrained, and you can't do as much with the page. So it
yeah.
really is the heyday of that Sunday page is before World War II.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what interested me. And I feel like I think that that entire history of starting with the Yellow Kid and the newspaper wars between who was it, Hearst
And Pulitzer.
and Pulitzer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that because there was this sudden sort of popularity of this medium and drive to produce it, it mixed really interesting creators with maybe some less interesting ones, which in a way maybe kind of, I don't know, served to lower this, not lower the standard, but lower the sort of popular idea of what comics could be.
Hmm.
And I really feel that they, that maybe not so much anymore, but I feel like for so much of the 20th century, the comics just had such a bad reputation
Oh,
as
yeah.
right, especially in this country.
Yeah.
So much associated just with children or with kind of low quality work.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing I feel like I would love to really counter with this show. I mean, not that that's so much of a belief maybe anymore,
Hmm.
popularly. I don't know.
Well, I mean, from my own perspective, I think it is
Yeah,
quite different now.
yeah,
Um, and I think people are more aware of the breadth of comics and the depth of creativity among the artists. So I do think it's although that cliche, that stereotype still, like all stereotypes, it's difficult for us to rid ourselves of it entirely.
yeah,
And so it does still perpetuate in certain areas, you know. Um, I mean, you will periodically come across that disparaging remark, about comics being for kids and, et cetera. But for the most part, I think it has changed. But the conundrum there is that at the same time that comics were disparaged as lowbrow material, they were enormously popular
yeah,
in popular culture. I mean, to a degree that they're nowhere close to now. Wherein characters like Popeye or characters like Dick Tracy or whatnot. I mean, there's a
yeah,
famous story of during the newspaper strike in New York, Mayor LaGuardia reading the comics over
yeah.
the radio.
Right.
The reason
I've
being,
seen that.
right, that people were missing out on their Sunday comics and he didn't want them to miss the Sunday comics.
I
So
didn't want them to miss
he
it.
read the stories over the radio. Well,
Yeah.
that's the depth of their popularity. Plus, they've been mined for, for merchandising and mined for other
Endlessly.
endlessly. Yeah. So for all of the disparaging remarks about them
Yeah,
throughout their history, they're also a source of enormous creativity and popularity at the same time.
yeah.
So, witness comic book movies today, but they've far superseded the comics in popularity and impact.
Yeah, it's funny because in the comics course we had a little bit of a debate the other night about how about where comics stand. Like, is the place of comics in today's popular culture more as a sort of like a starting point for other
Mhm.
media, like the Marvel universe in film now, like is that really where are comics just a sort of springboard, I guess, is the for something like that, or can they continue to persist? Because obviously they do persist.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Well, there's a lot of questions in regard to that. But if you think, I think, and you probably had this discussion in your class, if you think of comics solely as the purview of large corporations like DC and Marvel,
right.
then yes, indeed, DC and Marvel comics have been superseded by the movies. But on the other hand, if you think of comics as an endeavor in which it's an extraordinary array of individual artists are
Yeah,
working in their studios, it's the heyday of
it
independent
is.
creativity in comics because there's
Yeah.
just so many people doing really interesting work in a variety of media, both online and in alternative publications or, in working, whether you're talking about big publishers like Fantagraphics, big small publishers like Fantagraphics or Drawn and Quarterly. There's all kinds of material there. And then you're also talking about self-publishers. If you go to all these different festivals for
Yeah.
or independent comics like Crossroads Columbus or the Mocha Fest in New York,
Yeah.
you see all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff. So it's incredible,
It
really.
is. It's true. And honestly, that is the other aspect of this show that was really important to me, was to showcase that how much and like the depth and breadth of what's currently out there in terms of artists working in a lot of different kinds of directions, but also with, like, going back to what we were saying before, with a lot of different media.
Hmm.
So like in the show, we have cut paper, we have watercolor, we have real variety that I'm
Wash.
hoping, Yeah, right. Also that it just it all I'm hoping that it at least to some extent reflects the breadth that is currently out there. I mean, it's a really exciting time in a lot of ways to be doing this kind of work.
So, so this brings us to that next topic then. We've talked about, the historical work. Let's talk about some of the contemporary work. Who are some of the people that you guys have brought to the show and are excited to exhibit? I know you mentioned cut paper, and I'm looking at the cover of the invitation right here,
Mhm.
and this wonderful like recreation, or maybe it's a new piece of Little Nemo, which is all apparently in cut paper. It's a gorgeous piece. Um, who's that by? That piece. The name is on
That's by Maëlle D'Oliva, if I'm
okay.
pronouncing her name correctly. I hope so. Yeah, and she that is an original it's not a copy of a Little Nemo, it's a riff
It's a
on
riff on Little Nemo, but
Little
it's all
Nemo.
done in cut paper.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It really is. It's a beautiful piece of collage work. And now, is this a print or you've got the original?
We have
We
the original.
You have the
Yeah.
original. So, and what's the scale of that? Because I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I wish on a podcast people could see it. I'm excited. I can't wait to see it in person myself.
It's 21 by 16.
21 by 16.
She worked pretty closely to the original broadsheet size that a lot of the early 20th century artists were working with.
That's terrific. And is all of Mael's work in cut paper collage?
Everything in the show is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that that is her dominant medium.
Mhm.
I don't think it's her only, but she's I have always known her as an artist who works with cut paper.
Yeah, this is my first introduction to her work. And I'm curious, does she is she more attuned to gallery and exhibition work, or is her work in print as well?
Also
It
in
is
print.
It's
it's
also in
also in
print.
print. And
Yeah.
Okay.
at the moment, I believe she is in the midst of a book length project
Oh,
that's all cut
wonderful.
paper.
Great, great. And I'm just curious, as long as we're talking about her work, um, will she be coming to the opening, or is she anywhere near?
She's our furthest
Uh-huh.
away
Uh,
geographically. She's in Los Angeles.
Los
So
Angeles. Okay.
no, I mean, right, Casey, she's not coming to any of it, I don't think.
No. And she really gets a special uh I don't know. She should get an award for
Props.
participating in the show because she was affected by the Eagle Rock fire
Yeah.
a couple weeks
Wow.
ago.
Oh no.
She was
Yeah.
evacuated
Oh
and
no.
and yet her work still made it to us in time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she
And
gets
I
the
don't think she
gold star.
lost any work in the fire, right? I think she was evacuated, but her house
As
was
far as I
okay.
know, as far as I know, her work is safe.
I hope so. My God, because her work is gorgeous. It's really
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it
Uh,
really is. And it's really it's such an unusual take on
yeah.
the medium for this kind of format.
Makes me wonder if she does pop-up books because there is a dimensionality to some of this
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, I would like to
That-
know the answer to that too. I don't know that
Interesting.
she
Yeah.
maybe well, do you know Beehive Books?
I know I've heard of
Josh
it. Yeah.
O'Neill is
But I
the
haven't.
she was working very closely. In fact, she was part of Beehive Books for a while, and I don't think she is anymore. But
She is. She's still involved.
she is.
Yeah, she's the co-founder and she's their creative director and in-house designer.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
I'll have to
so
look.
possibly through them because they do these, very unusual limited edition
Mhm.
graphic versions of Moby Dick and things
Oh,
that are
very cool.
sort of
Yeah.
classics.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to really just look into them. Dive.
Yeah,
This
Beehive,
sounds fascinating.
they
Beehive
they
books.
are usually at MoCA,
Okay.
and some of the other festivals. I think they sort of do the circuit.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So who are some of the other artists? You did mention Charles. So Charles Featheroff is in the show.
Yeah, he's also downstairs right
He's
now.
also downstairs. Hey, Charles.
He lives in my house.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so
he
tell me what Charles has got in the show.
So he has two watercolor pages that are from that are also a take on Little Nemo. They're actually about Peter Bruegel
Uh-huh.
because he lives with me, and so there's it's all one big it's all mixed together. So his is it's a Little Nemo story, instead of Little Nemo, it's Bruegel sitting at his drawing table and he falls asleep and has a dream.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and the dream is all of these different creatures and that are sort of bird-like and also sort of Bosch-like because
Uh-huh.
Bruegel was very influenced by Bosch.
Hmm.
And his is watercolor. And watercolor is really his medium of choice.
Right, right. I'm familiar with Charles's work, of course.
Yeah,
And I look forward to seeing it. That sounds like a great subject.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Charles's work has appeared in heavy metal as
it's been in heavy
most recent.
metal. Yeah, and a bunch and some Dark Horse publications, Once Upon a Time Machine, and there were a
Hmm.
couple iterations of that. But yeah, heavy metal is the most recent.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah.
great. And how large are Charles's works?
Casey, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't, they're big, but they're not. I,
22 by 17.
oh, that's a good size. Yeah, pretty good
So
size.
he's
Okay.
also he's also sticking close to the broadsheet
Hmm.
standard.
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
the one
And
that's really big is Bodhi Tuning's
mhm.
work that's in the show. What do you have the dimensions there, Casey, for that one? It's like 40
I think it's about 3 by 4, I would say.
Oh,
feet.
wow.
Yeah.
Bodhi chewing is that so what kind of work does Bodhi do?
He honestly, I
He
can't remember.
also the piece that's in the show is also an homage to Little Nemo.
It
Oh,
is.
wow. So Little Nemo really runs through the show.
Little Nemo runs through the show, and that's partly, I mean, a fair amount of the of my interest in this comes from not only Little Nemo, but that book that was that was the one that you guys have in your library, the
Yeah,
big Dream Another Dream.
right. Beautiful book.
Yeah, so there are a couple in the show that are based on the Little Nemo concept,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
including Mael's, not everything by Mael d'Oliva, but at least one, the one that's on the cover of the invitation, and then Bodhi's and Charles's and one other maybe. And then we have
Hmm.
some other artists. We have Benjamin Morse, who is an independent. He's another self-published comic artist who did a piece that he made for the show that is kind of an homage to classic sort of golden age comics covers, and
Hmm.
that's really beautiful as well. I don't remember what the medium is, but do you? It's black and white.
Mhm.
But do you know what the medium is, Casey?
It's ink.
It's
It's in.
ink.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting to think of how when we think about creativity with this idea of the Sunday comics page, how Little Nemo and Winsor McCay really sets the table for that. Even
Mm.
to this day, that's a standard that is, I mean, it is the standard really for
Do you
creativity.
feel that way as a maker? I mean,
Well, from my own perspective, there's so many different people. Harriman, I think, I think of Little Nemo and Winsor McCay, those two people in particular. But I also think of early Alex Raymond, Flash Gordon stuff,
hmm
because he did some wonderful mural-like things with the page that I just adore. So those are some of the people I tend to gravitate to. They are all pretty much prior to World War II, for the
yeah.
most part, because that's when the page was as offering as much space and availability for creative endeavor
Mhm.
as it ever did. Um,
Yeah.
as it becomes more formulaic, I became less and less interested. From my own perspective, I come from, I mean, multiple sort of backgrounds. I studied to be a painter, and I worked as a outside using the language of comics. I worked in, pretty much singular pieces that were derived from comics language, but were mural size and things of that nature,
Interesting.
collages and stuff. And so I come from that kind of background, thinking like a painter, thinking in terms of the canvas. And so what I always was so intrigued by and engaged by in the Sunday page is that idea that here's a printed canvas, that is available for a mass audience. You can
Yeah,
utilize this space. Unfortunately, mass media is not that amenable to creativity. And so, the idea of that just went by the wayside. But to me, what a missed opportunity. Here's this thing that's mass media that reaches millions of people, and you can be as creative and engaged as you want to be, and you can bring
exactly.
along an audience. And so I always, in my dreams, imagine that page. As obscure as some of my work can be, I kind of imagine that page as being something that reaches the mass audience, and yet so it brings this element of painting and collage and data and other things
Yeah,
into you know
absolutely.
that we just never had the opportunity to, or artists in general never had the opportunity to exploit this medium. So for me it's like an imagined kind of a gallery that goes out in the newspaper every week.
That's a
To
great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a kid, also growing up, I just, for me, the greatest excitement was, Sundays after I was raised, Catholic, and on Sundays it was Mass. So coming back from Mass, my father would stop at the drugstore and pick up the newspapers, and the Daily News was always the Sunday newspaper we would get, and it was wrapped in a comic section, and Dick Tracy was a full page, and Dondi was a full page on the other side, and I loved both those comic strips, and I was just enthralled with it. So,
Yeah.
so I have that connection to it too. I've never lost that love of the Sunday page, even more so than comic books, really. Uh,
Really?
yeah, even more so than
Yeah.
comic books.
Yeah.
Another thing that that engaged me, and this is just totally off topic, I guess, but or not off topic, but it's my own personal you know background. My folks, when I was like, I took a comics course with somebody, um a cartoonist by the name of Mary Gannum, and I don't know whatever happened to her, but this was at SUNY Binghamton before it became SUNY Binghamton. It was still,
Hmm. Hmm.
and she taught this continuing ed class, and I was like 13 or 14. And she introduced me to all these ideas about, the history of comics and different things. And she introduced me to some underground comics as well. I was a little
Nice.
young for it, but it was still, she was opening up my mind. I ended up being the only student in that class because nobody else wanted to, I talked too much. Nobody wanted to draw as much. So,
Can I ask
y-
you,
yeah.
was this around the time of the underground or a little bit later? I don't want to
No,
date you.
it was
But
like we're talking 72, 73.
yeah,
So, underground was still percolating, even though it was on its way out. The head
yeah,
shops there was a head shop or two in the area at that point. But they were gone certainly by 74, they were all gone.
they were gone.
Yeah. But I was really lucky. My mother was a perpetual student. This is like totally off, but mother was a perpetual student, and she loved going to school, and she would like take me along to. She was a musician, and she'd go to the music library to find something, and she'd bring me along, and I'd be like lost in the university libraries, looking for stuff and sitting there. And so I got luckily enough, I found my way to a bookstore, the university bookstore, and it had all kinds of comics, underground comics and other things. And
At the university bookstore? That's
yeah,
awesome.
so it was pretty cool. And
Yeah.
um, I remember one birthday, she bought me a bunch of stuff from the university bookstore, which again, more or less set me off on a path,
Mhm.
for good or ill. And so I was very fortunate in that way. But all that stuff was still kind of around. Um,
Yeah.
but I found my way to these collections of Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon that really cemented my love of the Sunday page. There were
Yeah.
these early collections that were out in 73 or 74 by Nostalgia Press, and they're much reviled now because they cut up the Sunday pages to fit like a graphic novel.
Oh, right.
But I fell in love with the storytelling and the artwork because they're both master artists, and anyway,
Yeah.
Alex Raymond and Hal Foster, and that did it, you know. So I've been in love with the Sunday Comics page ever since then, you know.
Did, can I ask, did you find, and maybe this is off topic too, but did you find that when you went to study art in college that avenue was not really open to you as something to study?
It was not open. No, there was no place to study. I was in art school and I was at a great art school. It was Philadelphia College of Art before it was the University of the Arts.
Oh, which just
Much,
closed.
yeah, the much lamented. I love
Oh,
the place, and I'm so sad that it's closed. I mean, this is
I'm
just
so sorry.
again a sign of the times. I hate to say, you know, along with Philadelphia Academy of Fine Art closed as well,
Oh,
Philadelphia,
mm,
and both of those institutions were in great cultural centers, you know, percolators for
yeah.
a lot of great artists. Anyway, no, it wasn't available really then. The course I took in continuing ed was about all you could get when I was like 13 and 14, and so that was about it. But you know, there were still kids who were fascinated by comics, but learning comics was hard because there were a few books that taught you how to, you know, lay out a page and how to use ink and stuff, but there
Yeah.
wasn't a lot. You had to find it on your own.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Charles had been through the same thing because we're approximately in the same ballpark.
Yeah, he actually, we live in New Paltz, and he went to SUNY New Paltz for his BFA, and was complete shut down at the very beginning from any idea of pursuing comics as something to study. So he also, his BFA is in painting,
Hmm.
which is, you know, I mean, painting's great,
Oh yeah.
but you
I'm
know,
so glad for the experience, and it really, for myself, my sensibility, and I'm something I'm sort of rediscovering now. My sensibility is really in that, you know, the idea of the artwork as a singular object, and maybe there's a thread that runs through it. I'm much more comfortable myself thinking those terms rather than thinking in terms of traditional graphic narrative.
mhm.
So that's why a show like this is so exciting to me, because part of it has to do with this idea of the singularity of the page, you know. The page
Yeah,
appears every week, but it's an individual entity. You don't get all the pages at once, you get one a week. And so it is like a gallery, you know, where the exhibition changes every week.
ex- exactly. But like where you get you know like the general framework, but you don't know what you're going to get in any individual week.
Yeah, you don't, so that's part of what's exciting about it. And one week the art is going to be, you know, serviceable and tells a story, and then another week it's just going to knock your socks off, you know.
Right.
And although with an artist like, you know, Hal Foster, your socks are knocked off every week. So, you know. So
Yeah.
tell me about the installation of the show. You know, and Casey, I suppose this is where your expertise really comes in because you're the gallery director. So how did you lay the show out, and you know, what kind of connections through that are you trying to make in the exhibition?
Yeah, I would say we so to produce the reproductions, we I had them printed at their original scale so that
Hmm.
they were as accurate a reproduction as possible.
Hmm.
Um, and there there are some walls where you have a really clear, you know, connection between um, like for example, we have the Little Nemo pages together with the original
Hmm.
Little Nemo from 1921. Um, and and then other walls are more um, sort of thematic in the things we put together or composition wise. Um, there's an interesting play of similarities between what the contemporary artist is doing
Hmm.
and what the historical comic does. Um, it it's always laying out an exhibition is a combination of many factors,
Hmm.
and so much of it is as practical as it is sort of conceptual.
Hmm. Yeah,
So we, you know, we had a it's a white cube gallery
right.
and only so many walls to work with,
Hmm.
and And the size of the artwork is so similar,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all two-dimensional. So there's not a lot of variety in format.
Mm-hmm.
And so to break that up, we have on most walls, we have a little bit of distance between the contemporary works and the historical works, just to create a rhythm for
Mm-hmm.
the visitor to understand that here's the precedent, here's here's the contemporary thing.
When you're dealing with the pragmatic, obviously you've got to be thinking in terms of, well, how many things are actually going to fit on this wall, and what things are, but as you go through, were there any kind of sort of thematic connections or connections that surprised you, or that you didn't like? You'd put together a couple of pieces and see how they fit together, but were there connections or dialogues that happened that were kind of engaging or surprising at all? Because obviously you couldn't, until you got to work there, you couldn't really see how it
Yeah.
played out.
I would say maybe there were less of those kinds of surprises in this show, putting
Hmm.
together this show in person. Um, and I think that owes to the two-dimensional nature of the artwork. Um, if we're doing a show with a lot of sculpture, a lot of installation work, you're working until the artwork arrives, you're working from thumbnails and JPEGs and installations, maybe from other locations.
Hmm.
You're depending on, the lighting that was available when that photograph was taken. Or, you're doing a studio visit and you've got, iPhone pictures that you're working from. Um, but illustrators, uh, much like printmakers, I've found, are meticulous about documentation.
Mm.
And the quality of the reproductions that we were working from the earliest stage up through when the work arrived, were fantastic. And we had really high quality digital scans from Columbia.
Oh, great.
So I would say a lot of the themes that we wanted to discuss and the themes that we wanted to show through side-by-side comparison, we were able to formulate those pretty early on,
Hmm. Hmm.
just because the work was so true to the reproductions were so true to the original work.
I imagine it's a fairly colorful exhibition.
It is.
It is,
It
yeah,
is.
I would imagine, yeah. And so as you walk through, you're talking about a rhythm, and I guess that's probably something you think about in all your exhibitions, right?
Mhm.
Is how to create a rhythm and a flow. Um,
Absolutely.
so tell me a little bit about William Paterson Gallery. How long you've been there and some of your experiences there. Like, what are some of the shows you've done that that in the past that you have been excited about, and maybe some of what's coming up.
Sure. So I've been at William Paterson for about 7 years.
Mhm.
I've been director of the galleries for about 4 years. And as we were talking about, um, you know, the just sort of the way that comics have been received by popular versus critical audiences, and the fact that they're just now getting their due, really, reminded me of a lot of shows we've done, actually.
Mm.
And I think, I don't know if it's my own interest in the kind of the marginalized forms of art. I think anyone studying material
Definitely my
culture, when
interest.
you're studying everyday stuff,
Mhm.
yeah, um, I I think I'm just a little more
Mhm.
democratic in my approach.
Yeah.
Um, and there's so many similarities to a show we did not too long ago, El Cartel, the poster,
Mm.
Oh, that was a great show.
Puerto Rican graphic arts.
Oh, wow, sounds
And
great.
Yeah,
much like the Sunday comic, um, poster art
Yeah.
has been been really sidelined for no good reason.
Yeah, I agree totally.
It's that
Um,
same, I think, sort of popular, like,
yeah, what's popular is
commercial.
often left out of the canon,
Yeah,
Hmm.
yep,
or
Hmm.
has been
has been.
left out of the canon historically. Um, and so for no good reason other than elitism,
Sure.
and preference, really personal preference for other types of media. So I think now we're seeing finally attention given to these subjects that have a popular appeal, because that's not a bad thing.
No, it's a great thing.
Um,
It's a great thing. Because I mean, especially one of the big things you find is that there are really talented, capable people working in these media that we often take for granted and often just dismiss, because particularly we've come out of, I don't know, the history, the culture around art has always been around about categorizations of high art, low art, popular
Yeah,
art, etc. And because of the money that's involved, right? I think in part that's entrenched these distinctions.
yeah,
Uh, I think that's changed a great deal now because you'll find, you know, at comic art auctions that we're paying as much for an original comic by Jack Kirby, comic page by
yeah,
Jack Kirby, as you are paying for a Jasper Johns print or something like that.
right. Yep.
yeah.
We're thousands of dollars in the case of both of those, and so, but still, those distinctions, are hard to crack because they're sort
They
of
are.
entrenched, right? Yeah,
They're entrenched.
yeah. It reminds
That's where
me,
the good material is. I mean, that's where the really interesting conversations come from.
sure,
Yes.
yeah, because yeah, I mean, you're opening up a subject that has been previously taboo to some degree,
Exactly.
you know.
Hmm.
Uh,
And I also feel like it's very easy to create categories that are just based around medium,
Yes.
when in fact, if you sort of try to destroy the categories and think about and ask different kinds of questions, you could, I mean, there's all kinds of interesting connections between so-called high and low, and not even maybe getting rid of those two terms, but I think it's easy to exclude things when you are saying, like that painting exists in its own category and only should be thought of in terms of other paintings. Then
Hmm.
that's not how history is either.
Right.
No.
Right. And it's not how artists work either.
Right, exactly.
But it's
Well,
it's
in fact, what
interesting.
were paintings originally? Paintings were preparatory works for tapestries, because
They were,
tapestries
and tapestries were way more
were
expensive.
way more. Tapestries were the most elite thing that
Yeah.
you could have. The most expensive thing you could have in
And
your home was a textile at one
not
point.
to continue too far with this, but what's also interesting about tapestries is that they actually have a utilitarian function. Like they were,
Exactly.
they're insulation, right? So, and we're always taught that, the highest
Utilitarian, it can't be
cannot be
valuable.
Right.
utilitarian.
Exactly. Yeah, the utilitarian it's got to be, it can't have any use whatsoever in order to be art.
Exactly, in order to be art.
In order to be art, it's got to be completely useless.
Right.
And singular.
And
And
what? And
And
singular.
singular. It
Yes,
cannot
right,
be
that's
not
right.
mass
mass produced.
produced.
It cannot be serialized.
And
Right.
certainly not for, a sort of broad audience.
Right.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's got to be high-minded and
Right.
certainly there.
Comics are high-minded, which is interesting. Like I they're so complicated. They're so complex, the themes that comics take on, but they do it in a way that's so accessible.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the unique
It's so
thing.
deceptive.
It is deceptive because the language is simple to follow and simple to understand. And a lot of children learn to read by reading comics. At the same time, it's interesting. I was sitting down. I had a student who I'm working with who's doing a comics project, and we were talking about how how there's a multiplicity of processes that go on in putting together a page, a comics
Mhm.
page, and it's it comes down to putting together all of these disparate elements, the
Yeah.
visual along with the text, along with the page, the space. Thinking about the progression, how you move from one part of the page to another part of the page. If you're working in a book, how one page impacts another, the page that follows, how you create a rhythm, how you create a sequence in time because, even though it's a book or a Sunday comics page, comics exist in time. They are
Exit
a
time.
time-based medium. It's very intricate, and one of the things that you find is that it's very much like a puzzle in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, but a very ornate puzzle and enormously complex because it works in all these different ways. Or you have to utilize all these different skills really all at once simultaneously. And so it may be very accessible, but the process by which you conjure up and manifest a page
Yes.
is
Many
very
stuff.
tricky, very intricate,
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. But I'm thinking about previously reviled works of art or reviled media, and one of the best shows I ever saw when I was living in New York was at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. It was a show of pulp art from pulp magazines and illustrations from the entire
I
history.
saw that show.
You saw that show.
Oh, that was such a good
It
show.
was such a good show and
Yeah.
such trash, and I love, but great trash.
Great
And
track.
you know what I mean by that? It's
Yep.
like it's the
Oh, I
seediest,
forgot about that show.
trashiest, stuff, but at the same time, it's so wonderfully executed. Some of those paintings were done in several hours, and you think about the immense skill, but they also reveal a certain, and I don't like necessarily always looking at art from a sociological perspective, but because after a while it just kills, it's soul killing. But when I look at that work, you see some of the aspects of American culture that are so much there, a part of our culture,
Hmm.
right on the surface, guns and violence and all that stuff, and sex and all that stuff was there in those paintings,
Hmm.
right on the surface of it, and people bought them up like, magazines like hotcakes, in those days. So it was kind of a really interesting show for that. And those paintings for years, it's just been tossed around,
I was gonna say treated like worthless,
Yeah.
I don't even remember like where they came from for that show, like, but
Yeah. Somebody had collected some things. They had started to become collectible around the time that that show was put together. But prior to that, you'd find them in a dumpster.
yeah.
Um, and there was no value given to them at all. But they're really revealing of sensibilities,
Hmm.
revealing of an era, revealing of some foundational aspects of our entertainment culture that still exist. We still go for the sensationalistic, action movie.
Right, like the impulse is still there.
It sure is. Yeah, it
Yeah.
sure is. As much as we pretend to hire, you know, more elevated sensibilities, at the same time, that
Yeah.
thread runs through. It's really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the shows that are coming up at William Paterson that we have to look forward to in the coming year?
Sure. So this spring, we also have before after reflections on the Armenian genocide, which
Oh,
is a show of Armenian American artists, contemporary artists
mm-hmm,
who are reflecting on the genocide. And, you know, some of the work touches on it in a very literal way.
mm-hmm,
And a lot of the work touches on universal themes like family history, cultural resilience, um, and, sort of recovering the things that were lost.
mm-hmm. What was
Yeah.
there some impetus for this show at this particular time?
Well, April is Genocide Awareness Month.
Okay.
So we'll also be having a conference
Oh,
on
fascinating.
uh, on post memory and cultural resilience
Okay.
in April to
Uh-huh.
accompany the show.
Oh, fascinating. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have our annual student exhibition, which is juried by faculty members from the art department.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be coming up in April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just around the time of graduation. So how many shows do you do a year?
We do about 6 exhibitions every year.
Uh-huh. And is the gallery open over the summer?
It is not.
It's not. So you close for the summer and then the show. And are a number of the shows, do you try to tie them into some of the things that are happening on campus? Or do you work independent of that? Or
I think the shows tie into what's happening on campus because we have such a strong connection with the faculty.
mhm.
I try very hard to work with and co-curate with faculty members who are doing exciting things, and not just in art and art history, but in science,
Mhm.
um, and other liberal arts fields. So yeah,
Fantastic.
I think
That's
so.
great. Yeah. So it sounds like a great resource, for the students, and the community, as well. It's sounds like a really great place. Um, and I have to say myself, I was impressed, by uh not only by the card that you sent out for the shows this year, but just in general, just like it seemed like you guys were really on top of things. And I mean, providing a FedEx slip for shipping was like, wow, it's the kind of thing our gallery probably wouldn't do. Uh,
Wouldn't do.
but it's great. And the attention to detail I think you brought to this exhibition is was impressive to me too. So, um, I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait. The opening is just this week, is it not? I mean, not the
The
opening celebration,
show's
but the show
opening.
opens.
Yeah.
Show opens on the 10th.
Yes,
On the 10th. So that's great. So it'll be open. So you must be are you in the middle of finalizing installation, or is it all up and ready to go?
it is complete. It is ready to go.
All
Ready
right,
to
so you got
go.
the weekend off.
Yes,
Good for you. That's
yes.
great. That's nice. So, and I'm sure it looks really, really terrific. I can't
It
wait
looks
to see
great. I'm so excited. And our building is set up so I mean this glass cube is in the middle of the building, so no matter where you're going, you're walking by it, and even from the second floor you can see down into it.
Oh,
Uh,
terrific.
so it's been really fun. And I mean honestly, this is only the second time I've ever curated any show.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm finding this all super exciting. I'm also really impressed with how organized Casey's gallery is. Like,
Yeah. So, Claudia, what if you were to curate shows in the future, what do you think you'd be doing more around your area of expertise, or uh
um, I mean, it's funny in my main area, being a curator in the world of Renaissance and Baroque art is like a really a separate thing from teaching.
Mhm.
So I don't often have opportunities to curate, and I don't know that. So I don't know. I don't know. I would love to do more comics shows. I mean, I
Ah,
really think
ah.
I think because I just feel like there's so many other questions to be asked, and there's so many, and I would love to do a show that was like based around process, like what you were saying before, both of you, about how intricate and kind of multifaceted the process is. And I feel like that's something that would be just so interesting to explore. So
On
yeah.
that note, I should connect you with Glenn Fleischman, because Glenn
Okay.
Fleischman, the guy who did the How Comics Were Made book, which is terrific. It's a great book. If you don't have it, if I connect you to
Yeah.
Glenn, you should reach out to him and get
Okay.
um it will open up. I think you'd love, if you're interested in that, you could probably work with Glenn and do an exhibition um around that subject that would be fantastic. He's got some great stuff in his collection. He's got a whole week of Doonesbury cartoons that are not cartoons.
That's my
They're
childhood favorite.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I love Doonesbury,
Yeah.
particularly in the 70s. He was
Yeah,
just
in the 70s.
the
Yep, I have
70s.
some right behind me.
Yeah, yeah, right. I have those early books, the Doonesbury Chronicles and all
These
those.
are your Chronicles. It's sitting right there.
Oh my God, that book, I laughed so loud. Oh my
I
God.
didn't even understand most of the political stuff. I was too young, but I just loved I,
Oh,
I
uh,
loved it all.
I was
Yeah.
just at the right age.
Yeah.
During Watergate, I was at the right age for all of that. Actually, I understood Watergate better from him than anybody else. But
I bet.
anyway, he's got some great stuff. Not the actual cartoons themselves, but some of the the ephemera. I'm losing the vocabulary now, because there's a highly specific vocabulary for the plates and flong. I think that's what it's called. The
Long?
things
I've never
the
heard that
things that are
term.
used to make the plates. He's
Yeah.
got all this great stuff, and it's incredible. And I think it would make a great show. And if you're interested, I'll put you in touch with
Yeah,
him.
put me in touch. Where's he based?
He's out in Seattle,
Okay.
so but he does travel. So
Okay.
I think you dig that, and it would be
Yeah,
so cool
I
to
definitely
have.
love to talk to him.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I want that book. I'm gonna see if the
Yeah.
library will order it.
You'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. It's a great.
Okay.
It's wonderful. It's coming out from Andrews McMeel sometime in the near future, but I know he's got copies. So
Okay.
that
Oh,
should
but
be.
it's like it's new now. Just
It came out from Kickstarter originally last year,
oh, okay.
and
Got
I
picked
just
up.
had him on the show. If you go to if you go to Apple Podcasts, you look for Blockhead, you look for my most recent show, Glenn was on. So
Okay. I'll
both
give
you
it a
guys
listen.
would, I can imagine you conjuring up a really cool
Yes.
exhibition for this.
Yeah.
So before
Great.
anybody else gets them,
Yeah.
So, I think you'll enjoy that. Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this. It's great to Claudia. We met many years ago at a was it SPX or a Mocha Fest? I don't remember.
It could have been either one. I've been to more mochas than SPXs.
Might have
So
been that.
probably,
Yeah.
but I feel like it might have been SPX and I brought my son when he was a baby. I feel like you
Yes,
were
that's right. It was SPX.
it
Yeah.
was SPX and you were at the next table.
Yes, I was right next to you
Right.
guys.
Right,
Yep.
right, right.
That's where we
Yeah.
met. Years and years ago. I don't want to say how many years ago, but
Oh,
I
it
still
was, I
had.
can tell it was probably 15 or 16 years
I
ago.
think I think it was longer. I still had hair on my head. What was left of it. It's not there anymore. So to my continual dismay. But nevertheless, uh, so
Thank you so
this
much for having us.
oh yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah,
like I
thank you,
said,
John.
it's exciting to talk about. I love talking about Sunday comics. I love it. It's a great subject, and I'm excited to see the exhibition because I love seeing the stuff full size.
Mhm.
Give those artists their due and let their work sing.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
totally. And you'll be at the panel
I
discussion, is that
will.
right?
Yep. I will be at
All
the
right, great.
discussion. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. That's the night of the official opening in
Yes.
March. Yeah, the official
Yes.
opening is March 11th, is it?
Yes.
March 11th. And that is at what time? 5, 6 o'clock?
5, I think it starts at 5 and the panel's at 6.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, 5 at 6. So folks, if you're listening and you're anywhere near where is it? New Jersey.
Wayne, New Jersey.
Wayne, New Jersey. Okay. If you're anywhere near Wayne, New Jersey, make your way. I know I've got a couple listeners in New Jersey at least. So make your way over and to William Paterson Galleries at William Paterson University in Wayne, New Jersey, to meet all of the artists who are, or not all of them, but whomever shows up, and Claudia and Casey, and enjoy this great exhibition, which is open to the public on February 10th through March 20th. So it's up for a little more than a month.
Yes.
Yeah.
So don't miss it. It's going to be great.
Don't miss it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys, for being on
Thank
the show.
you.
Appreciate it. So there you have it. Among the things that we actually didn't get a chance to talk about are a couple of events that are happening in conjunction with the Sunday Comics show. First and foremost, the great Robert Sikoryak is doing one of his carousels, those slideshows in which cartoonists act out in front of an audience, a live audience, act out the sequences from their comics. And it's a slideshow, and cartoonists get up on stage, read from their comics, sometimes act them out and add all kinds of other things to them. And this event has played across the country. I guess Robert Sikoryak has taken it all over the place, and it's been very successful. It's been very successful over the years, and innumerable cartoonists have participated. I thought I was going to be able to myself, but I can't do it. But this is February 25th from 6 to 7 p.m. In the gallery there, and hosted by Robert Sikoryak. So don't miss that, right? It's Carousel, hosted by Robert Sikoryak, and it's February 25th from 6 to 7 p.m. This sounds just absolutely terrific. I wish I could be there for it, but I can't. Very exciting. Another event attached to this show will be the official opening reception Tuesday, March 11th from 5 to 6 p.m., after which there is a panel discussion from 6 to 7 p.m. In the gallery, and I will be participating in that myself, along with, I think, several other cartoonists who will be there as well. Charles Featheroff, I think, is going to be one of them, and I think there may be others as well. So I think Robert Sikoryak is actually going to be there for that, too. So don't miss it, right? Carousel on February 25th from 6 to 7, and the panel discussion and opening reception on March 11th from 5 really till 7 p.m. So both events sound really exciting. The show sounds really exciting, and I hope you make your way to see it and to join me at one or the other of these events. So be looking forward to that, okay? That's really all I have to say for today. There's a lot going on in my mind and in my work at the moment, but we'll leave it for another day to talk about. But for now, as always, it's been a pleasure. It was a wonderful conversation with Claudia and Casey. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, as always, thanks for listening.